Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're lost in the fog-drenched streets of Victorian London. It's late, the air is thick with mist, and the only sound is the clatter of horse hooves fading into the distance. You're alone, hurrying down a shadowy alley when a soft, confident laugh cuts through the silence. A woman's voice, sharp and teasing, like she knows something you don't. Your pulse quickens as you glance over your shoulder, but there's no one there, or is there. That laugh belongs to Irene Adler, a woman so brilliant, so cunning, that she outsmarted Sherlock Holmes, the greatest detective who ever lived. This isn't just a tale of a case gone wrong, it's a pulse-pounding clash of wits. A game of cat and mouse, where the mouse just might win. How did one woman, with nothing but her charm and intellect, bring the unbeatable Holmes to his knees? Grab a snack, get comfy, and let's dive into this electrifying story of deception, brilliance, and suspense. If you're already hooked, smash that like button and subscribe to follow this thrilling ride through the foggy heart of London. Let's travel back to the late 1880s, a time when London was the beating heart of the British Empire, a sprawling maze of grandeur and grit. Picture the scene: gas lamps flickering on cobblestone streets, horse-drawn carriages rattling past, and a city buzzing with secrets. In this chaotic, smoky world, one man stands above the rest: Sherlock Holmes, a name that echoes like a thunderclap. Created by the brilliant Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Holmes isn't just a detective. He's a phenomenon, a mastermind who can unravel any mystery with a glance. His home at 2-1B Baker Street is a sanctuary of intellect, a cluttered haven filled with books, scientific equipment, and the faint strains of his violin. Clients pour in: daily aristocrats with stolen heirlooms, shopkeepers with cryptic threats, even Scotland Yard inspectors who've hit dead ends. And by his side, always, is Dr. John Watson, his loyal friend and chronicler, scribbling down every case with a mix of awe and disbelief. Holmes's mind is nothing short of extraordinary. He's like a human computer, processing details most people don't even notice. Imagine this: a man walks into his flat, and within seconds, Holmes has sized him up. A scuff on his shoe. He's been walking in the clay-heavy soil of South London. A faint ink stain on his cuff. He's a clerk who's been working late, a nervous twitch. He's hiding something, probably a debt or a secret. In one famous case, Holmes deduced a man was a retired naval officer because of a faded anchor tattoo, the salt-stained hem of his coat, and the way he stood with a sailor's sway. In another, he solved a murder by spotting a single blade of grass stuck to a victim's shoe, linking it to a rare plant only found in one London park. That's the kind of brain we're talking about, mind that sees the world as a puzzle. Every detail a piece waiting to be slotted into place. But it's not just his intellect that makes Holmes a legend. It's his method. He calls it the science of deduction, a system so precise it's almost mathematical. He observes, analyzes, and eliminates the impossible until only the truth remains. Picture him pacing his Baker Street flat, pipe in hand, muttering to himself as he connects clues. Watson, sitting by the fire, scribbles notes, barely keeping up. Holmes could disguise himself as anyone: a cab driver, a priest, even a beggar, to slip through London's underbelly and gather information. One time, he posed as a plumber to infiltrate a mansion, eavesdropping on a gang planning a heist. All without raising a single suspicion. Scotland Yard. They're practically his cheerleaders, always one step behind, marveling at how he spots what they miss. To Holmes, every case is a game, and he's the Grand Master, always 3 moves ahead. Let's paint a fuller picture of his world. Victorian London was a city of contrasts. The wealthy sipped tea in opulent parlours, while the poor scraped by in crowded, soot-stained slums. Crime was rampant. Pickpockets roamed the markets, blackmailers preyed on high society, and murderers lurked in the shadows. Holmes thrived in this chaos, navigating it with ease. He'd slip into a smoky tavern to overhear a whispered plot, or climb a rooftop to spy on a suspect. His disguises were legendary. Watson once recounted how Holmes transformed into an old flower seller, complete with a stooped posture and a convincing Cockney accent, to trail a thief through Covent Garden. No detail was too small, no clue insignificant. Whether it was a missing jewel, a coded message, or a body in a locked room, Holmes always found the answer. He didn't just solve crimes, he owned them, leaving criminals trembling and the police in awe. But even a genius has a blind spot. For all his victories, Holmes was about to face a challenge unlike any other. Not a hulking villain or a secret society, but a single woman, Irene Adler. She wasn't a criminal mastermind in the traditional sense, no daggers or dark alleys for her. Instead, she was armed with something far more dangerous, a mind as sharp as Holmes's, a charisma that could charm anyone, and a fearlessness that made her unpredictable. Holmes was used to being the hunter, but Irene, she was about to turn him into the hunted. This wasn't just another case. It was a showdown that would test his pride, his skills, and his belief in his own invincibility. Irene Adler wasn't just a name, she was a storm. And she was about to sweep through Sherlock Holmes's world like nothing he'd ever faced. Why does this story grip us? Because it's more than a detective tale. It's a battle of egos, a clash of intellects, and a reminder that even the greatest can stumble. Holmes thought he was untouchable, but Irene Adler was about to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Her story isn't just a chapter in his adventures. It's the moment that shook his foundation and cemented her as a legend in her own right. By now, you're probably itching to know who this woman was and how she pulled off the impossible. Don't worry, we're just getting started. In the next chapter, we'll step into the dazzling, dangerous world of Irene Adler and discover what made her the one person Sherlock Holmes could never outwit. If you're loving this journey, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single twist. The fog is thickening. Now, let's turn the spotlight on the woman who shook Sherlock Holmes's world, Irene Adler. Who was she? Not a shadowy criminal or a villain twirling a mustache. She was something far more intriguing. Irene Adler was a force of nature, a woman whose beauty, wit, and courage made her unforgettable. In the story A Scandal in Bohemia, written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, she's introduced as the woman to Holmes, a title that says it all. She wasn't just a name in his case files. She was the one who left a mark on his ironclad heart. But what made her so special? Let's dive into her world, a place of charm, secrets, and a mind sharp enough to cut through even Holmes's defenses. Irene Adler was born in New Jersey, USA, but her story truly begins in Europe, where she carved out a life as an opera singer and actress. Picture her on a grand stage, her voice soaring through a packed theatre, her presence commanding every eye in the room. She wasn't just talented, she was magnetic. Her performances as a prima donna in places like Milan and Warsaw earned her fame, wealth, and a string of admirers. But Irene wasn't content to be just a star. She was a woman who lived life on her own terms. In a time when women were expected to be demure and obedient, Irene was bold, independent, and unafraid to defy convention. She moved through high society with ease, mingling with kings, diplomats, and artists, all while keeping her own secrets close. Let's set the scene. It's the late 1880s, and Irene is living in London, a city that both adores and whispers about her. She's not just a performer, she's a strategist. Imagine her in an elegant townhouse, surrounded by velvet curtains and gilded mirrors, planning her next move like a chess grandmaster. Her beauty was undeniable: dark hair, striking eyes, and a smile that could disarm anyone, but it was her mind that made her dangerous. She could read people as easily as Holmes read clues, picking up on their weaknesses and desires with a glance. For example, she once charmed a diplomat into revealing a state secret during a casual dinner, not because she needed it, but because she could. That's the kind of power she wielded, not with force, but with finesse. Irene's life wasn't all glamour, though. She was a woman in a man's world, and that meant navigating danger at every turn. Victorian society was rigid, with strict rules about what women could and couldn't do. An independent woman like Irene, who travelled alone, made her own money, and answered to no one, was seen as scandalous. Whispers followed her rumours of romantic entanglements, of powerful men who'd fallen under her spell. One such man was the King of Bohemia, a figure central to her clash with Holmes. Their past relationship, shrouded in mystery, left Irene with a photograph, a piece of evidence so dangerous it could topple a throne. This wasn't just a memento, it was her insurance, her leverage in a world where power was everything. What made Irene truly unique was her unpredictability. Unlike the criminals Holmes usually faced, she didn't follow a script. She was as comfortable in a glittering ballroom as she was slipping through London's back streets, always one step ahead. Picture her in a disguise of her own, maybe as a street vendor or a veiled widow, moving through the city unnoticed while plotting her next move. She wasn't driven by greed or malice. She was driven by survival and a fierce desire to protect her freedom. That's what set her apart from the thieves and murderers Holmes was used to chasing. She wasn't breaking the law for personal gain. She was playing a bigger game, one where the prize was her independence. Let's talk about her personality for a moment. Irene was fearless, but not reckless. She was charming, but never manipulative. For cruelty's sake, she had a knack for turning situations to her advantage, like the time she outwitted a nosy journalist who tried to dig into her past. Instead of confronting him, she fed him a false story so convincing he published it, leaving her real secrets untouched. This was a woman who knew how to play the game and play it well. To Holmes, who prided himself on reading people like open books, Irene was a locked diary with a hidden key. Her confidence, her quick thinking, and her refusal to be intimidated made her a formidable opponent. Now, why does Irene Adler matter? Because she wasn't just a foil for Holmes. She was his equal in every way that counted. In a world that underestimated women, she used that to her advantage, turning society's biases into her greatest weapon. Holmes was about to learn that not every puzzle could be solved with logic alone, and not every opponent could be outmaneuvered with a clever disguise. Irene Adler was a storm, and she was about to sweep through his carefully ordered world, leaving chaos in her wake. This chapter sets the stage for their epic showdown. But the real question is, how did their paths cross, and what sparked their battle of wits? That's what we'll uncover in the next chapter, where a royal scandal pulls Holmes into Irene's orbit. If you're as captivated by Irene as I am, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next twist in this thrilling tale. The stage is set, the players are ready. And now the curtain rises on the case that would define Sherlock Holmes's career, the infamous scandal in Bohemia. It all begins on a chilly evening in 1888, with the fog rolling thick over London's streets. Sherlock Holmes is lounging in his Baker Street flat, pipe in hand, when a knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. Dr. Watson, sipping tea by the fire, glances up as Mrs. Hudson, their landlady, ushers in a mysterious visitor. The man is tall, aristocratic, and cloaked in secrecy, his face hidden behind a mask. But Holmes, with his razor-sharp eye, sees through the disguise in an instant. This is no ordinary client. This is Wilhelm Garzreit Sigismund von Ormstein, the King of Bohemia himself, and he's come to 221B Baker Street with a problem so delicate, so explosive, it could shake the foundations of his throne. Buckle up, because this is where the game gets real. Let's dive into the heart of the scandal. The king, a man used to power and control, is in a panic. Years ago, when he was still a prince, he had a romantic fling with none other than Irene Adler, the dazzling opera singer we met in the last chapter. It was a whirlwind, affair passionate, reckless, and, for the king, a youthful mistake he now regrets. Why? Because Irene holds a photograph, a single image of the two of them together, that could ruin him. The king is about to marry a Scandinavian princess, a match that will secure his kingdom's alliances. But if that photograph surfaces, it could spark a scandal so juicy it would derail his engagement, embarrass his family, and destabilize his reign. In Victorian Europe, where royal reputations were everything, this was no small matter. The king needs that photograph back, and he needs it now. Picture the king, pacing nervously in Holmes's cluttered sitting room, his heavy accent filling the air as he explains his plight. He's tried everything, offering Irene money, sending agents to negotiate, even hiring thieves to steal the photograph. Nothing has worked. Irene Adler isn't just holding onto the picture. She's guarding it like a treasure, and she's made it clear she's not afraid to use it. The king is desperate, his royal pride wounded by this woman who refuses to bend. He's heard of Holmes's reputation, the detective, who can solve the unsolvable, and he's betting everything on the hope that Holmes can retrieve the photograph before it's too late. Watson, listening intently, can't help but notice a flicker of excitement in Holmes's eyes. A case this high stakes, involving a woman as formidable as Irene Adler. This is exactly the kind of challenge Holmes lives for. Now, let's talk about why this case is so different. Holmes is used to dealing with straightforward criminals, thieves who leave footprints, murderers who slip up with a careless clue. But Irene Adler isn't a typical adversary. She's not motivated by greed or revenge. She's holding the photograph for her own protection, a shield against a world that could crush a woman like her. The king paints her as a scheming adventuress, but Holmes senses there's more to her. He's intrigued, maybe even a little wary. After all, this is a woman who's outsmarted a king and his entire network of agents. She's not going to be an easy mark. Holmes agrees to take the case, not just for the hefty fee the king offers, but because he can't resist the puzzle. Who is this Irene Adler, and how is she staying one step ahead of everyone? Holmes begins his investigation with his usual flair. He and Watson dig into Irene's life, piecing together her movements. She's living in a stylish villa in St. John's Wood, a quiet but affluent part of London. She's seen at the opera, at fashionable parties, always poised and untouchable. But there are rumors that she's been spotted in disguise, slipping through the city's underbelly, as if she knows someone's watching. Holmes, ever the strategist, starts to form a plan. He knows brute force won't work. Irene's too clever for that. He needs to outwit her, to get inside her house and find where she's hidden the photograph. But how? This isn't a case for lockpicks or brute strength. It's a battle of intellect, and Holmes is about to discover just how formidable his opponent is. Let's pause and imagine Holmes at work. Picture him in his Baker Street flat, maps and notes spread across the table, his pipe sending curls of smoke into the air. Watson watches, fascinated, as Holmes sketches out a plan that's equal parts genius and theatrical. He'll use a disguise. Of course, perhaps a clergyman or a tradesman to get close to Irene's home. He'll stage a diversion, something dramatic to throw her off guard. It's classic Holmes, meticulous, bold, and just a little showy. But there's a catch. Irene isn't just any target. She's a woman who sees through facades, who anticipates moves before they're made. Holmes is confident, maybe too confident, that his plan will work. After all, he's never failed before. But deep down, there's a spark of doubt. What if this time he's met his match? The stakes couldn't be higher. For the king, it's about saving his throne and his reputation. For Holmes, it's about proving he's still the master of deduction, the man who can solve any problem. But for Irene, it's about something even bigger. Her freedom, her safety, her right to exist on her own terms. This isn't just a photograph. It's a symbol of her power, her ability to stand up to a king and win. As Holmes prepares to make his move, he's walking into a game where the rules are unclear and the opponent is unlike any he's faced before. The fog of London seems to thicken around him, as if the city itself is holding its breath, waiting to see who will come out on top. Why does this chapter matter? Because it's the moment when two worlds collide, Holmes's world of logic and control, and Irene's world of instinct and defiance. This case, A Scandal in Bohemia, isn't just about a photograph. It's about pride, power, and the clash of two brilliant minds. Holmes thinks he's in control, but Irene Adler is about to show him that even the greatest detective can be outplayed. What happens when Holmes steps into her world? Will his carefully laid plans unravel? That's what we'll explore in the next chapter, where Holmes puts his scheme into action and discovers just how clever Irene really is. If you're on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next twist in this gripping tale. The battle is just beginning, and it's going to be a wild ride. The game is on, and Sherlock Holmes is ready to make his move. It's 1888, and the foggy streets of London are buzzing with the tension of a royal scandal. Holmes has been hired by the King of Bohemia to retrieve a compromising photograph from Irene Adler, the woman who holds his fate in her hands. But this isn't a case for brute force or simple detective work. Irene is too clever for that. Holmes knows he needs a plan as brilliant as she is, one that combines his knack for disguise, his love for theatrics, and his razor-sharp mind. Picture the scene. Holmes in his Baker Street flat, surrounded by maps, notes, and a cloud of pipe smoke, plotting his approach like a general before a battle. Dr. Watson, ever the loyal sidekick, watches in awe as Holmes lays out a scheme so bold it could only come from the world's greatest detective. If you're as excited as I am to see how this unfolds, let's dive into the action and Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to keep up with this thrilling tale. Holmes's plan is a masterpiece of deception, designed to get him inside Irene Adler's villa in St. John's Wood without raising suspicion. He knows Irene is no ordinary opponent. She's observant, cunning, and likely expects someone to come after the photograph. A direct approach, like breaking in or confronting her, would fail spectacularly. Instead, Holmes opts for something more his style, a carefully orchestrated performance. He decides to disguise himself as a clergyman, a figure so unassuming and trustworthy that even someone as sharp as Irene might let her guard down. Picture Holmes transforming in his flat, donning a black clerical suit, a wide-brimmed hat, and a pair of spectacles that give him a meek, scholarly air. He practices a soft, hesitant voice, perfect for a humble man of the cloth. Watson, watching him apply a touch of makeup to age his face, can't help but marvel at the transformation. This isn't just a disguise, it's a role, and Holmes is about to give the performance of his life. But the disguise is only half the plan. Holmes knows he needs to get close to Irene's home and learn where she's hiding the photograph. To do that, he needs a diversion, something dramatic enough to distract her and her household. Here's where his theatrical flair kicks in. He enlists a group of his trusted contact street performers, cabbies, and even a few of London's less savoury characters to stage a fake brawl outside Irene's villa. The idea is simple but brilliant. Create chaos, draw Irene out, and give Holmes a chance to slip inside, or at least observe her reaction. He briefs his team meticulously, assigning roles like a director staging a play. One man will pretend to be a drunk, another a passerby trying to break up the fight, and a third will act as an injured victim, clutching his side and crying for help. Holmes, as the kindly clergyman, will rush to the scene, offering aid and gaining Irene's trust. It's a plan that relies on split-second timing and human psychology, and Holmes is confident it will work. After all, he's never failed before. The day of the plan arrives, and the air is thick with anticipation. Holmes, now fully in character as the clergyman, makes his way to St. John's Wood. Picture him walking down the quiet, tree-lined street, his head bowed, his steps slow and deliberate, every inch the pious figure he's pretending to be. Irene's villa is elegant but discreet, with tall windows and a neatly trimmed garden. Holmes takes up a position nearby, blending into the background as he waits for his team to act. Right on cue, the brawl erupts a cacophony of shouts, scuffling, feet, and the crash of a bottle against the pavement. The drunk staggers into the street, yelling insults, while the passerby tries to pull him back. The injured man collapses dramatically, clutching his side and groaning. Neighbors peer out their windows, and Irene's front door creaks open. Holmes's heart races, but his face remains calm, the picture of a concerned clergyman, Irene. Adler appears at the door, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. She's dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her dark hair swept up, her eyes scanning the scene with sharp intelligence. Holmes steps forward, his voice gentle as he offers to help the injured man. Irene, ever compassionate, invites the wounded. Menand Holmes, as the kindly clergyman, to her home to tend to his injuries. This is it. Holmes is inside. The villa is as stylish as its owner, with plush carpets, ornate furniture, and a faint scent of jasmine in the air. Holmes keeps his eyes down, playing his role, but his mind is racing, taking in every detail. Where could the photograph be? A hidden safe, a locked drawer. He notices a small table with a carved box, A fireplace with a loose brick, a bookshelf with volumes that look slightly out of place. Every detail is a potential clue, and Holmes files them away for later. But Irene is no fool. As she tends to the injured man, her eyes flicker toward Holmes, studying him. Does she suspect something? Holmes feels a prickle of unease, but stays in character, offering soothing words and a prayer for the man's recovery. The diversion works perfectly, the household is distracted, and Holmes has a moment to observe Irene up close. She's poised, graceful, but there's a steel in her gaze that tells him she's not easily rattled. When the injured man miraculously recovers and leaves with thanks, Holmes follows, bowing humbly as he exits. He's done it. He's been inside her home, seen her in action, and gathered valuable clues. But as he walks away, he can't shake the feeling that Irene was watching him just as closely as he was watching her. Let's talk about why this moment is so pivotal. Holmes's plan is a testament to his genius, his ability to manipulate situations, read people, and stay one step ahead. But it's also a gamble. Irene isn't like the criminals he's used to. She's a woman who thrives on seeing through facades. Did she notice something off about the clergyman? Did she sense the staged chaos for what it was? Holmes is confident, but there's a tiny crack in his armor, a whisper of doubt. He's playing a game of chess with a master, and every move counts. This chapter shows Holmes at his best, clever, bold, and in control, but it also sets the stage for what's to come. Irene Adler is about to turn the tables, and Holmes doesn't even see it coming. So, what's next? Holmes has his clues, but he needs to act fast. The photograph is still out there, and the king is growing impatient. In the next chapter, we'll see Holmes push his plan to the next level, using one of his boldest tricks yet to uncover Irene's secret. But will it be enough, or is Irene already one step ahead? If you're loving this cat and mouse game, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next twist in this thrilling saga. The chessboard is set, and Sherlock Holmes is ready to make his next move in this high-stakes game against Irene Adler. It's 1888, and the foggy streets of London are practically humming with the tension of the King of Bohemia's scandal. Holmes has already pulled off a daring stunt, infiltrating Irene's villa in St. John's Wood disguised as a clergyman and staging a fake brawl to get inside. He's seen her home, noted potential hiding spots for the infamous photograph, and felt the weight of her sharp, observant gaze. But he's not done yet. Holmes knows that to outwit someone as brilliant as Irene, he needs to push the boundaries of his ingenuity. This chapter is where things get willed, a plan so bold, so theatrical, it could only come from the mind of Sherlock. Holmes picture him back at 2-1B Baker Street, his eyes gleaming with determination as he hatches a scheme that will either secure the photograph or leave him outplayed. If you're on the edge of your seat, let's dive into the action, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay locked into this thrilling tale. Holmes's latest plan is a masterstroke of deception, designed to force Irene Adler to reveal the location of the photograph without her even realizing it. He knows the photograph is her most prized possession, her leverage against the king, and she's likely hidden it somewhere clever, somewhere only she would think to look. A safe, too obvious, a locked drawer, too simple for someone like Irene. Holmes suspects she's concealed it in a secret compartment, perhaps in her villa's walls or furniture, a place that would only be revealed in a moment of panic. And that's exactly what he plans to create. A moment of panic. His idea: stage a fake fire outside her home, creating just enough chaos to make Irene rush to protect her most valuable asset. It's a risky move, but Holmes is confident. After all, he's the master of reading human behavior. And he's betting that even Irene Adler will act on instinct when her safety is at stake. Let's set the scene. It's the evening after Holmes's clergyman stunt, and he's back in his Baker Street flat, laying out the details with Dr. Watson. The room is a mess of papers, tobacco ash, and half-finished experiments, but Holmes is laser-focused. He explains the plan to Watson, who listens with a mix of admiration and nervousness. Holmes will return to Irene's villa, this time disguised as a working-class man, perhaps a plumber or a gas fitter, to avoid suspicion. He's enlisted. His ragtag crew of helpers again, including a few street urchins from his Baker Street irregulars, a group of young boys who run errands and gather information for him. Their job creates the illusion of a fire by setting off smoke bombs outside Irene's villa, shouting warnings, and banging on doors to simulate panic. Holmes will use the chaos to slip inside or observe from nearby, watching for Irene to retrieve the photograph. Watson, ever the loyal friend, agrees to come along, ready to play his part as a concerned bystander. The night of the plan is dark and misty, the perfect backdrop for deception. Picture Holmes, now transformed into a rough round plumber with a cap pulled low and a toolbox slung over his shoulder. His face is smudged with dirt, his posture slightly slouched to complete the disguise. He and Watson arrive in St. John's Wood, the quiet street lined with elegant homes glowing softly in the fog. Irene's villa stands out, its windows casting a warm light onto the cobblestones. Holmes signals his team, and the chaos begins. The irregulars light the smoke bombs, and thick, choking clouds billow into the air, curling around the villa like a dragon's breath. They shout, "Fire! Fire!" their voices echoing through the night, while one bangs on a tin bucket for added effect. Neighbors poke their heads out, alarmed, and the street erupts into a frenzy of shouts and running feet. Irene's front door flies open, and there she is, calm but alert, her eyes scanning the smoky scene. Holmes, positioned nearby, watches closely, his heart pounding but his face impassive. This is the moment he's been waiting for. Irene steps outside, her expression a mix of concern and calculation. She doesn't panic, but she moves quickly, calling to her servants to check the house. Holmes seizes his chance. As the plumber, he rushes forward, shouting about a gas leak that could make the fire worse, a clever lie to get inside. Irene, distracted by the chaos, nods and lets him in, her focus split between the supposed danger and her own instincts. Holmes's pulse races as he crosses the threshold, his eyes darting to every corner of the villa. The carved box on the table, the loose brick by the fireplace, the bookshelf with its slightly crooked volumes. He's cataloguing every detail, waiting for Irene to make her move. Inside, the villa is a whirlwind of activity. Servants rush about, grabbing buckets and blankets, while Irene directs them with a cool head. But Holmes notices something. Her eyes keep flickering toward a small ornate panel in the drawing room wall, barely noticeable unless you're looking for it. Could that be it? His plan is working. She's thinking about the photograph. As the smoke thickens outside, Holmes pretends to inspect the gas pipes, moving closer to the panel. He's inches away from uncovering her secret when something unexpected happens. A gust of wind clears the smoke, and one of the irregulars, caught up in the excitement, accidentally drops a smoke bomb, revealing the ruse. Irene's head snaps up, her gaze locking onto Holmes. For a split second, their eyes meet, and he sees it a spark of recognition. Does she know? Has she seen through his disguise? Irene doesn't hesitate. She calls off her servants, calmly declaring the fire a false alarm. The neighbors, realizing there's no real danger, retreat to their homes, and the street falls quiet. Holmes, still in character, mumbles an apology about the gas pipes and makes his exit, his mind racing. He's certain now the photograph is behind that panel. He saw the way Irene's eyes darted to it, the subtle tension in her posture. But he also knows he's been too obvious. Irene is no ordinary opponent. She's a woman who thrives on reading people, and that moment of eye contact has him worried. Did she recognize him? Was the fire too theatrical, too perfectly timed? As he and Watson slip back into the fog, Holmes feels a rare pang of uncertainty. He's so close to victory, but Irene Adler is proving to be a puzzle he can't quite solve. Let's take a moment to unpack this. Holmes's fire scheme is peak Sherlock, bold, clever, and just a little audacious. It shows his genius for manipulating situations, turning human instincts into tools for his deductions. But it also reveals his blind spot, underestimating Irene. He assumed she'd react like anyone else, rushing to save her most prized possession. Instead, she stayed composed, her actions calculated, her suspicions sharp. That glance she gave him wasn't just curiosity, was a warning. Holmes is playing a dangerous game, and for the first time, he's not entirely sure he's winning. The photograph is within reach, but Irene is still holding all the cards. This chapter is a turning point, where the balance of power starts to shift, and Holmes begins to realize he's up against someone who might just be his equal. So, what happens next? Holmes has his Clutha panel in the wall, but he needs to act before Irene catches on. The fog of London seems to tighten its grip as Sherlock Holmes stands on the brink of triumph, or so he thinks. It's 1888, and the battle of wits with Irene Adler is reaching its fever pitch. Holmes has just executed a daring plan, staging a fake fire outside Irene's villa in St. John's, would to trick her into revealing the hiding place of the compromising photograph. He's certain he's found it a secret panel in her drawing room wall, betrayed by her fleeting glance during the chaos. But that moment of eye contact, that spark of recognition in Irene's gaze, has left Holmes with a rare flicker of doubt. Is he truly one step ahead, or is Irene Adler playing a deeper game? This chapter is where everything turns upside down, where the master detective faces a twist so clever it will leave him and us reeling. Picture Holmes, his mind racing as he prepares to close in on his prize, unaware that Irene is about to pull the rug out from under him. If you're as gripped by this cat-and-mouse chase as I am, let's dive into the heart of the action, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to catch every twist in this thrilling saga. Holmes is back at 2-1B Baker Street, the air thick with tobacco smoke and the buzz of his relentless mind. Dr. Watson sits by the fire, scribbling notes, his eyes wide as Holmes recounts the success of the fire scheme. The secret panel in Irene's villa is the key, Holmes is sure of it. He saw her glance at it, her body tense with the instinct to protect her most valuable possession. The photograph, the one that could ruin the King of Bohemia, is hidden there, and Holmes is ready to retrieve it. But he's cautious. Irene Adler isn't like his usual adversaries. She's a woman who anticipates moves before they're made. He can't just barge into her villa and pry open the panel that would be too crude, too obvious. Instead, he needs a plan that's subtle. precise, and worthy of his genius. And he needs to act fast, before Irene suspects he's onto her. Let's set the stage for what's coming. Holmes decides to return to St. John's Wood the very next day, this time with a simpler but no less cunning approach. He'll pose as a delivery man, bringing a package to Irene's villa, something mundane, like a parcel of books or a gift from an admirer, to gain entry without arousing suspicion. Watson will accompany him, playing the role of a curious neighbor checking on the previous night's fire commotion. The goal: get close enough to confirm the panel's contents without tipping Irene off. Holmes spends the night preparing, selecting a worn jacket and cap for his disguise, practicing a gruff working-class accent, and even smudging his hands with ink to sell the part. Watson, ever loyal, is both excited and nervous. He's seen Holmes pull off miracles before, but there's something about Irene Adler that makes this case feel different, like they're walking a tightrope over a chasm. The morning dawns, grey and damp, the kind of London weather that cloaks everything in mystery. Holmes and Watson make their way to St. John's Wood, the streets quiet except for the clatter of early delivery carts. Holmes, now a scruffy delivery man, carries a carefully wrapped parcel under his arm, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his cap. Watson trails behind, dressed in his usual respectable attire, ready to play his part. As they approach Irene's villa, Holmes feels a surge of adrenaline. This is at the moment he'll secure the photograph and end the king's troubles. The villa looks serene, its windows gleaming in the morning light, but there's an eerie stillness that sets Holmes's nerves on edge. He knocks on the door, parcel in hand, and waits. The seconds stretch, each one heavier than the last. Finally, the door opens, but it's not Irene, it's her maid. A stern woman with a nonsense air. Holmes, in character, mumbles about a delivery for Miss Adler, holding out the parcel. The maid takes it, her eyes narrowing slightly, and tells him to wait. Holmes glances at Watson, who's lingering nearby, pretending to adjust his hat while scanning the street. The maid disappears inside, and Holmes seizes the moment to step into the foyer, his eyes darting to the drawing room. The panel is there, just as he remembered, tucked behind a velvet curtain. His fingers itch to investigate, but he knows he has to be patient. The maid returns, saying Miss Adler is unavailable but has left instructions for the parcel to be left with her. Holmes nods, playing the part, but his mind is racing. Where is Irene? Why isn't she here to receive the delivery herself? Something feels off, like a note played out of tune. Then the twist hits like a lightning bolt. As Holmes turns to leave, he notices a letter pinned to the parcel, addressed to Mr. Sherlock Holmes. His heart stops. The maid, oblivious, hands it to him, assuming it's part of the delivery. Holmes's hands tremble slightly as he opens it, his disguise forgotten. The letter is in Irene's elegant handwriting, and it's a bombshell. She writes that she knew he was the clergyman the previous day, saw through his fire scheme, and anticipated his return. She reveals spin that she's already left London, taking the photograph with her. But here's the kicker. She has no intention of using it against the king. It's her insurance, her protection against a world that seeks to control her, and she's keeping it safe far from Holmes's reach. She signs off with a playful, "Good game, Mr. Holmes," and a promise to vanish into a new life where no one, not even the great detective, can find her. Holmes is stunned, his mind reeling. As he reads the letter again, Watson, catching up, sees the look on his friend's face and knows something's wrong. They retreat to a nearby alley, where Holmes explains the situation. Irene Adler has outsmarted him. She didn't just protect the photograph, she saw through every layer of his carefully crafted plans. The clergyman disguise, the fire, the delivery ruse. She was ahead of him at every turn. Holmes realizes she must have spotted him during the fire scheme, perhaps noticing a telltale gesture or the way he carried himself. And when he returned as the delivery man, she was already gone, leaving the letter as her final checkmate. The panel in the wall, a decoy, or perhaps it once held the photograph, but now it's empty. Holmes's certainty, his confidence, lies in tatters. Let's unpack this moment. Irene's letter isn't just a taunt, it's a masterclass in strategy. She didn't need to confront Holmes or fight him. She simply outplayed him, using his own methods against him. She knew he'd come for the photograph, knew he'd use disguises and tricks, and she turned his predictability into her advantage. For Holmes, this is a blow to his pride, his intellect, his very identity as the unbeatable detective. He's never been outwitted like this, never left standing in the fog with nothing but a letter to show for his efforts. Watson, ever the optimist, tries to console him, but Holmes is quiet, his mind turning over every detail, searching for where he went wrong. The truth is, he didn't make a mistake. Irene was just better. This chapter is a turning point, not just in the case, but in Holmes's life. Irene Adler isn't just a woman who escaped with a photograph. She's the one who showed him that even a genius can be humbled. Her victory isn't about The fog of London feels heavier than ever as Sherlock Holmes stands in the wake of his most unexpected defeat. It's 1888, and the great detective has just been outplayed by Irene Adler, the woman who saw through his every scheme. Her letter, left with the precision of a master strategist, revealed that she knew he was coming, anticipated his fire stunt, and even recognized him in his disguises. More stunningly, she's fled the city with the photograph, the one piece of evidence that could ruin the King of Bohemia, leaving Holmes with nothing but her words, "Good game, Mr. Holmes." For the first time in his career, Holmes is at a loss, his unshakable confidence rattled by a woman who proved herself his equal. Picture him back at 2-1B Baker Street, staring into the fire, the letter still clutched in his hand, as Dr. Watson watches with quiet concern. This chapter dives into the fallout of Irene's victory and how it reshapes the mind of the world's greatest detective. If you're as captivated by this twist as I am, let's jump into the heart of the aftermath. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to keep up with this gripping tale. The scene at 2-1B is somber, a stark contrast to the usual buzz of activity. The cluttered room, with its books, chemical vials, and violin resting in the corner, feels almost oppressive under the weight of Holmes's silence. Watson, sitting by the fire, tries to break the tension with a gentle question about their next move, but Holmes barely responds. His pipe lies untouched, a rare sight, and his sharp eyes are fixed on the flames, as if searching for answers in their flicker. The letter from Irene Adler sits on the table, its elegant handwriting a mocking reminder of his failure. Holmes is replaying every moment of the case in his mind: the clergyman disguise, the staged fire, the delivery ruse, searching for the misstep that cost him the game. But the truth is dawning on him. There was no misstep. Irene was simply better, her instincts and foresight outmatching his calculated brilliance. Let's step into Holmes's mind for a moment. He's not just grappling with the loss of the photograph, he's wrestling with what it means for his identity. Sherlock Holmes is the man who solves the unsolvable, the detective who never loses. Every case, from stolen jewels to cryptic murders, has ended with his triumph, his logic cutting through chaos like a blade. But Irene Adler didn't just evade him, she turned his own methods against him. She saw through his disguises, anticipated his tricks, and left him standing in her empty villa with nothing but a letter. For Holmes, this isn't just a professional setback, it's personal. He underestimated her, assumed his intellect would prevail, and now he's paying the price. Watson, ever the loyal friend, tries to lift his spirits, pointing out that Irene promised not to use the photograph against the king. But Holmes knows that's not the point. The photograph was never the real prize. The real battle was for supremacy, and Irene won. The King of Bohemia arrives at 221B later that day, his regal demeanor barely masking his anxiety. Holmes, now composed but still subdued, explains the situation. Irene Adler has vanished, taking the photograph with her. The king is furious at first, his face reddening as he paces the room, ranting about the scandal that could still erupt. But when Holmes shares Irene's letter, with its assurance that she has no intention of using the photograph, the king's anger softens into reluctant relief. He realizes that Irene's word is her banshees, not a blackmailer, but a woman, protecting her own freedom. The king, perhaps grudgingly, admires her resolve. He offers Holmes a lavish reward, a jeweled ring from his own hand, but Holmes declines, asking instead for the photograph of Irene Adler that the king had shown him earlier. It's a curious request, and Watson raises an eyebrow, but Holmes says nothing more. The king leaves, satisfied that his throne is safe. But Holmes is left with something far more valuable, a lesson. Let's paint the picture of what this moment means. Holmes's request for Irene's photograph isn't about sentimentality, it's about respect. Irene Adler is no longer just a case file. She's the woman, the one adversary who bested him. The photograph, a simple image of her poised and radiant, becomes a symbol of his defeat and her triumph. Holmes places it in a drawer at 2-1B, a quiet reminder of the one puzzle he couldn't fully solve. Watson notices a change in his friend in the days that follow. Holmes is quieter, more reflective, his usual sharp banter tempered by a new humility. He still takes cases, still dazzles clients with his deductions, but there's a subtle shift. He's less dismissive of others, less certain of his own invincibility. Irene Adler has left a mark, not just on his career, but on his soul. This defeat forces Holmes to confront his own limits. He's spent years viewing the world as a series of puzzles, each one solvable with enough observation and logic. But Irene showed him that human nature, her unpredictability, her courage can defy even the sharpest mind. Let's imagine him late at night, alone in his flat, playing a mournful tune on his violin. The notes are slow, haunting, as he processes what happened. He doesn't resent Irene. On the contrary, he admires her. She played the game better than he did, and in doing so, she earned his respect in a way no one else ever has. Watson, writing about the case later, notes that Holmes never speaks of Irene with anything but reverence, always referring to her as the woman. It's a title that carries weight, a testament to her place in his life. Why does this chapter matter? Because it's where Holmes, the unassailable detective, becomes human. Irene Adler didn't just outsmart him. She taught him that even genius has its limits. This isn't a story of failure, but of growth. Holmes emerges from this case not weaker, but wiser, with a newfound respect for the complexities of the human spirit. Irene's victory isn't about malice, it's about a woman carving out her place in a world that seeks to control her. For Holmes, it's a wake-up call, a reminder that no one is untouchable. What will he do with this lesson? Will it change how he approaches his next case, or will he bury it beneath his usual bravado? That's what we'll explore in the next chapter, as Holmes reflects on Irene's legacy and faces a new challenge that tests his resolve. If you're as moved by this moment as I am, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next twist in this unforgettable story. The echoes of Irene Adler's victory still linger in Sherlock Holmes's mind as he sits in his cluttered flat at 221B Baker Street. It's the autumn of 1888, and London is wrapped in its usual cloak of fog, the gas lamps casting a ghostly glow over the cobblestone streets. Holmes's defeat in the Scandal in Bohemia case has left a mark, not a wound, but a subtle shift in the great detective's perspective. He's still the master of deduction, the man who can unravel a mystery with a single glance, but there's a new humility in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that even he can be outplayed. Dr. Watson, ever observant, notices this change as they sip tea by the fire, the room filled with the familiar scent of tobacco and old books. A new case is about to land on Holmes's doorstep, one that will test whether he's truly learned from Irene's lesson. Picture Holmes, his sharp gaze fixed on the horizon, ready to dive back into the fray, but this time with a touch of caution he never had before. If you're as excited as I am to see how Holmes rises from his defeat, let's dive into this next chapter, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to keep up with this thrilling saga. The new case begins with a knock at the door, sharp and urgent, cutting through the quiet of the evening. Mrs. Hudson ushers in a nervous young woman, Miss Violet Hunter, whose pale face and trembling hands betray her distress. She's a governess, recently hired by a wealthy but eccentric family in the countryside, the Rupcastles. Her story is strange. She's been offered a generous salary to care for a young boy, but the job comes with odd conditions. She must cut her long hair short, wear a specific blue dress, and sit in a particular room at certain times, reading aloud. Holmes's eyes narrow as she speaks. This is no ordinary job offer, but a puzzle wrapped in secrets. Watson, listening intently, can't help but notice the spark of interest in Holmes's expression. It's the kind of mystery that would have once sent him racing to conclusions, but now he's more measured, his questions probing but deliberate. Let's set the scene. Holmes leans back in his armchair, pipe in hand, as Miss Hunter describes the Rue Cassel estate, a sprawling mansion in Hampshire, surrounded by dark woods and isolated from the world. The family is peculiar. Mr. Rucassel is jovial but unsettling, his wife cold and distant, and their son, a cruel boy who seems to take pleasure in tormenting animals. There's also a locked wing of the house, off limits to everyone, and a fierce mastiff that prowls the grounds at night. Holmes listens, his mind cataloguing every detail, but there's a difference in his approach. Where he once might have dismissed the case as a simple eccentricity, he now senses something deeper. Perhaps remembering how Irene Adler taught him not to underestimate the unexpected. He agrees to take the case, instructing Miss Hunter to send a telegram if anything changes, and promises to travel to Hampshire at a moment's notice. Holmes's investigation begins in his usual style, but with a twist. He and Watson pore over maps of Hampshire, research the Rucassel family, and even consult old newspaper clippings for clues. Holmes suspects Miss Hunter is being used as a stand-in for someone else, perhaps a missing daughter or relative, given the strange demands about her appearance. The locked wing and the guard dog suggest a secret the Rucastles are desperate to keep. But instead of charging in with a grand plan, Holmes takes his time, cross-referencing details with a patience that surprises Watson. He's learned from Irene that assumptions can be dangerous, and he's determined not to be outwitted again. Picture him pacing the room, muttering to himself, his violin lying silent as he pieces together the puzzle. The stakes are high, Miss Hunter's safety is at risk, and Holmes feels the weight of his responsibility. The turning point comes when a telegram arrives from Miss Hunter, urgent and cryptic. "Please come at once." Strange noises from the locked wing. Holmes and Watson board a train to Hampshire that very night, the countryside rolling past in a blur of shadows. At the Rucastle estate, they find Miss Hunter waiting, her face pale but resolute. She leads them to the locked wing, where Holmes's keen senses pick up faint scratches and muffled cries. Using his lock-picking skills, he opens the door to reveal a shocking sight: a young woman, emaciated and terrified, who bears a striking resemblance to Miss Hunter. She's Alice Rucastle, the family's daughter, locked away to prevent her from claiming her inheritance. The Rucastles had hired Miss Hunter to impersonate Alice, fooling visitors into believing she was still free. Holmes's careful approach has paid off. He's uncovered the truth without falling into a trap. This case, though solved, leaves Holmes reflective. He's triumphant, but there's no gloating, no smug satisfaction. Instead, he quietly ensures Alice's safety, arranging for her to stay with a trusted friend while the Rucastles face justice. Watson notices a new depth in Holmes, a respect for the human stakes of his work. Irene Adler's lesson lingers. Brilliance alone isn't enough. It must be tempered with caution and empathy. This chapter shows Holmes reclaiming his confidence, but with a newfound wisdom that makes him an even greater detective. What's next for him? Let's find out in the next chapter. But first, if you're loving this journey, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay with us. The victory in the Rucastle case has restored some of Sherlock Holmes's fire, but the shadow of Irene Adler still looms large. It's late 1888, and London is sinking deeper into the chill of autumn. Its streets alive with the clatter of carriages and the whispers of new mysteries. Holmes is back at 2-1B Baker Street, his mind sharper than ever. But there's a quiet intensity about him now, a sense that he's not just solving cases, but searching for something more. Irene's triumph in a scandal in Bohemia taught him that even the greatest mind can be outplayed, and that lesson is shaping his every move. As he and Dr. Watson settle into their routine, a new case arrives, one that feels eerily familiar, as if Irene's ghost is guiding it. Picture Holmes, his eyes glinting with curiosity as he opens a letter that promises to test his newfound wisdom. If you're as hooked on this saga as I am, let's dive into this next chapter. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to keep the adventure going. The letter comes from an unexpected source, a retired opera singer named Madame Celeste, now living quietly in London's West End. She's heard of Holmes's reputation and begs his help with a delicate matter. Her prized possession, a locket containing a miniature portrait of a mysterious figure, has been stolen, and she suspects it's tied to a secret from her past. The details are vague but intriguing: whispered threats, a shadowy figure seen near her home, and a note warning her to stay silent. Holmes's interest is piqued, not just by the mystery, but by the echoes of Irene Adler. A woman with a secret, a valuable object, a game of deception, it's almost too familiar. Watson, sensing the same connection, watches as Holmes's expression shifts from curiosity to determination. This is more than a case. It's a chance to prove he's learned from his past. Let's set the stage. Madame Celeste's home is a faded echo of her glamorous past, filled with velvet drapes, old playbills, and the faint scent of lavender. She's a striking woman, her silver hair and sharp eyes hinting at a life of drama and intrigue. As she tells her story, Holmes listens intently, his fingers steepled, his mind cataloguing every detail. The locket, she explains, is no mere trinket, it's a keepsake from a long-ago romance with a powerful man, now dead, whose family would do anything to keep their connection hidden. The thief, she believes, is someone hired by that family, but she has no proof, only suspicions. Holmes notices her hesitation, the way her eyes dart to a locked drawer, and he wonders, is she telling the whole truth, or is she playing a game of her own? Holmes's approach is cautious, shaped by Irene's lesson. Instead of rushing in, he takes time to investigate, sending Watson to scour the West End for clues while he tails a suspicious figure spotted near Madame Celeste's home. The trail leads to a seedy tavern where Holmes, disguised as a doctor, overhears a conversation about a job involving a locket. The culprits are hired thugs, but their employer remains a mystery. Holmes follows them to a grand mansion in Mayfair, home to the powerful Carstairs family, whose patriarch was Madame Celeste's lover. The pieces are falling into place, but Holmes senses a trap. Is Madame Celeste a victim, or is she manipulating him, using her story to draw him into a larger scheme? The thought of Irene's letter, her ability to anticipate his every move, makes him wary. The climax comes when Holmes stages a confrontation, arranging for Madame Celeste to meet the Carstairs family under the pretense of returning the locket. In a tense, drawing-room scene, he reveals the truth. The locket was never stolen. Madame Celeste hid it herself, hoping to use Holmes to expose the Carstairs' secrets and gain leverage over them. The shadowy figure and threatening note were her own creations, a ploy to draw attention. Holmes, anticipating her deception, had already found the locket in her locked drawer, using a subtle lock-picking trick to confirm his suspicions. The Carstairs are furious, but Holmes ensures no harm comes to Madame Celeste, recognizing her actions as a desperate bid for security, much like Irene's photograph. He returns the locket to her, but with a warning. Deception is a dangerous game, madame. This case leaves Holmes reflective. Madame Celeste wasn't Irene Adler, but her cunning echoed the woman who outsmarted him. Holmes sees now how Irene's lesson has sharpened his instincts, teaching him to question even the most convincing stories. He's not just solving crimes, he's navigating the complexities of human motives, a skill he honed because of the woman. Watson, writing about the case, notes Holmes's quiet satisfaction, not in victory, but in growth. This chapter shows Holmes embracing his evolution, using Irene's legacy to become a better detective. What's next for him? Let's find out in the final chapter. But first, hit that like button, subscribe. The year 1888 is drawing to a close, and Sherlock Holmes stands at a crossroads. The fog of London is as thick as ever, but for Holmes, the haze of his encounter with Irene Adler is beginning to clear. Her victory in a scandal in Bohemia wasn't just a defeat, it was a revelation, a moment that forced him to confront his limits and rethink his approach. The cases that followed, from the Rucastle mystery to Madame Celeste's deception, have shown a changed Holmes, one who blends his razor-sharp logic with a new respect for the unpredictable nature of human behavior. As he sits in his Baker Street flat, the photograph of Irene Adler tucked away in a drawer, Holmes is ready to face the future, forever marked by the woman who outsmarted him. Picture him by the fire, violin in hand, playing a soft melody as he reflects on her legacy. This final chapter explores how Irene Adler reshaped Holmes's life and cemented her place in his legend. If you've been gripped by this journey, let's dive into the conclusion, and don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below to share your thoughts. Holmes's flat is quiet tonight, the usual chaos of papers and experiments, giving way to a rare moment of calm. Dr. Watson, scribbling in his notebook, glances at his friend, who's staring into the fire, the photograph of Irene Adler on the table beside him. It's not just a picture, it's a talisman, a reminder of the one case that changed everything. Holmes has solved countless mysteries since then, from stolen jewels to murderous plots, but none have left the same imprint as Irene. She wasn't a villain, not even a criminal in the true sense, just a woman who refused to be outmaneuvered, who used her wit and courage to protect her freedom. For Holmes, she's become a benchmark, a measure of what it means to face a true equal. Let's reflect on Holmes's journey. Before Irene, he was a machine of logic, confident that every puzzle could be solved with enough observation and deduction. He'd unravel a man's life from the mud on his boots, or solve a murder with a single thread left at the scene. But Irene showed him that logic alone isn't enough. Her unpredictability, her ability to anticipate his every move, forced him to see the world differently. In the Rucastle case, he was cautious, double-checking his assumptions. With Madame Celeste, he spotted her deception early, wary of being played again. These successes weren't just victories, they were proof that Irene's lesson made him better, sharper, more attuned to the human heart. Picture Holmes walking the streets of London, his coat flapping in the wind, his eyes scanning for clues as always. But now there's a difference. He listens more closely to his clients, watches for the motives behind their words, and questions his own certainty. Irene taught him that even the greatest mind can miss something. That genius is not infallibility. He keeps her photograph not as a trophy of defeat, but as a symbol of respect. Watson, in his writings, captures this shift, noting that Holmes never speaks of Irene without admiration. She's the woman, not because she beat him, but because she challenged him to be more than he was. The legacy of Irene Adler extends beyond Holmes. In Victorian London, where women were often seen as secondary, she was a beacon of defiance, a woman who carved her own path, outwitting kings and detectives alike. Her story, as told by Watson, inspires others, a reminder that intelligence and courage know no gender. For Holmes, she's a constant presence, a whisper in every case that keeps him grounded. As he takes on new mysteries, perhaps a stolen treaty or a cryptic cipher, he carries her lesson with him. Never underestimate your opponent, and never assume you've seen the whole board. Let's imagine one final scene. It's late, and Holmes is alone, playing his violin as the fire crackles. The melody is wistful, a tribute to the woman who changed him. Outside, London hums with secrets, waiting for the next case to draw him back into the fray. He's ready, not just as the great detective, but as a man who's learned to balance logic with humility. Irene Adler didn't just outsmart him, she made him better, and her legacy will echo through every case he takes. This is the end of our story, but for Holmes, it's just the beginning of a new chapter, one shaped by the woman who will always be the woman. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through Sherlock Holmes's greatest challenge. If you loved this tale of wits, deception, and growth, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Drop a comment below. Did Irene Adler steal your heart like she did Holmes's? Let's keep the conversation going, and I'll see you in the next video.